G'day guys, it's Amiga. I don't know what's happening in your part of the world, but there's some interesting things happening in my part of the world with the whole coronavirus outbreak, pandemic, panic. It's the apocalypse, it's the end of the world. But uh, all I know is there's a shortage of toilet paper. I can't seem to get some bloody toilet paper at the moment. The shops down here, you've got all these idiots going down there panic buying toilet paper, which I think is pretty freaking hilarious myself, considering that, a lot of people who've caught the coronavirus said they didn't even know they had it. They just had a sore throat for a day and it was gone. Right here, right now in Australia, there's some pretty serious things going on with the government, though. We've got the government which has passed laws very, very quickly during this outbreak, and they've passed laws to basically restrict cash purchases up to $10,000, and that is something which, from memory, comes from the Al Capone era of the US, when they were trying to eliminate money laundering. That was sort of a reaction to what Al Capone was doing, and the IRS in America enforced that. So they've rushed that through the Australian Parliament. They've also rushed through a whole bunch of laws which give the state untold amounts of power to basically use force to keep people in their homes. They're talking about deploying the army. The army has a plan. The army has denied whether they may not use force, which is a bit concerning, really. And on top of that, they have also said that they will use forced medical. There are forced medical procedures, basically, that they can force upon people. And in the legislation, or in the laws they've enacted, it's anyone who poses a risk to public health, and not limited to coronavirus. So you can understand the implications of that, especially for anti-vaxxers. Now, look, I'm not sort of an anti-vaxxer. I am a pro-life person. I'm a Christian, so I'm a pro-life person. But I respect the rights of anti-vaxxers. If they don't want to be vaccinated, well, everyone's about your body or their body, when the abortion debate comes up. But these people's rights need to be respected. You can't stick a needle in somebody if they don't want it. What are they? They're literally talking about holding people down and sticking needles in them and vaccinating them, and not limited to just that, but any medical procedure they deem fitting for the situation at hand. So they're the laws that have just been passed, including shutting down entire towns, entire cities, stripping people of their rights. It's a pretty scary scenario when you think about who these people are. They're the government. They are not to be trusted. They are not good people. They are people with agendas, political agendas. Right now we're going through an election cycle in the US, and there are people who will do anything right now to get a vote. I mean, if you look at the DNC and the levels they will go to get a vote, or to rubbish Trump or whatever, they will go to any level. I mean, if you had Hillary Clinton right now, if she thought she could win an election by tipping coronavirus into the water system, or every well in America, she would do. I mean, that's how evil these people are. And so that's the sort of caliber we're dealing with. I think, as an Australian, I wish we had the same mindset as the US. I think that's a big downfall here in Australia. We're far too trusting of the government, and in the US, at least they're in touch with the reality. It seems even when the Constitution was written, they were more in touch with the reality than we are right now here in Australia. We trust our politicians to do the right things. It's sort of the Australian way. It's the mateship sort of ideology, if you like, but it's actually really flawed, and people trusting the government right now is probably not the right thing to do. People are right now here where I'm living, even in a fairly remote part of Australia, southernmost tip of Australia, around that area, people are mass buying toilet paper. I mean, you can't even buy toilet paper at the moment. I went to the gun store today, and I thought, well, I'll go and buy some ammunition. Usually when there's some sort of crisis in the US, when there are mass buy-ups, people buy up ammunition. We sort of order all of our stuff from the US. It comes here to Australia, you see. So what I'm doing is I went down there and I sort of questioned them and said, how is that going? And they said, well, gunpowder will not be available for the next 6 months. We got one small shipment in, so I got a small, I've managed to secure myself a box of gunpowder, and I've also bought a bunch of tips, bullet tips for my 223. Which is the most easily available round. It's a medium range round. It's very prolific. So I was able, and I actually literally got the last box of tips that were down there at the gun store. And we're looking at 6 months. As I said, we're looking at 6 months before we actually get gunpowder back into the country through the US for those rounds. So probably the same rounds you'd use in an AR-15, a 223 or a 5.56. But yeah, I'm stocking up on ammunition because I'm a hunter. I'm very self-sufficient here in Australia. Even if the shit hit the proverbial fan, I can look after myself. I've got a reverse osmosis system to get clean water. I've got excessive amounts of game I've got access to for hunting, and I can do it all on foot. I don't actually need a vehicle to do that, but I don't think it's going to get that bad. But just one other thing I want to give everyone a heads up on is just the fact that banks have been given the okay by it wasn't this way up until 2 years ago. 2 years ago, a lot of people invested money into the banks in Australia, and that's because if there's a major crisis, the Australian banks had a clause where banks could not take people's personal savings. Now, that was not the case in all the other countries of the world, including America, but 2 years ago they signed it in on Valentine's Day, when there were only about 5 politicians in Parliament who voted it in, and did it basically without anyone knowing. But I noticed it, of course. I was very vocal about it. People didn't pay attention. And I said, this is bad. This is really bad. You don't realise if there's some sort of crisis, these people can just take your money. The government's given them the golden tick to take your savings to so that basically the banks don't go under. And so I'm actually thinking about at the moment going and drawing some money out in cash and just making sure I've got a good supply of cash on hand. And I've already got a whole bunch of ammunition. I've got well over 1,000 rounds of ammunition, which I use for hunting purposes only, and basically to supply food for my family. And here in Australia, there's a prolific amount of kangaroos, and they're big animals. They get up to 80 kilos, and so for me, I can fill a deep freezer in a single afternoon with kangaroo meat if need be. Now, just to put things in perspective as well, 137 people die a day from snake bites. I mean, on a global scale, 28,000 people die from cancer every single day on a global scale. Something like 10 times the amount of people who've died from coronavirus will die in a week from suicide. I mean, it's just to put it in perspective, and people who've actually had coronavirus here in Australia have hardly noticed they've even had the virus. They've had a bit of a sore throat and that's gone away. If you're under 50, you've got a 99.8% chance of survival. So a 0.02 chance of death if you're under 50 years old. And then if you look at the 2% death rate across the board, that 2% death rate goes to the whole percentage of people in the country. So it includes people who have lowered immune system disorders or diseases. Basically people with major sort of pre-existing conditions. So it's a huge beat up. The general, even on a model, I saw a model and it said if this got completely out of control and all the rest of it, 28,000 people would die in Australia. There are between 25 and 27 million people in Australia. So if 28,000 people died, it's a drop in the ocean. It really is. And I think the hysteria which has been stirred up by the media, again, is for ratings. It's for the political establishment here in Australia. The government has already taken advantage of it and pushed through laws they'd wanted to push through for years. They haven't been able to because they haven't had the right circumstances to do that. They've pushed through those laws. And in America, being in the middle of an election cycle, as I've already mentioned, being in the middle of an election cycle, the DNC, they'll do anything. I mean, let's face it. Let's just look at the behaviour of the DNC. Let's look at the behaviour they've been exhibiting over the last few years. It's just insanity. There are no lows that they won't hit to try and win the election. They would rather see the entire stock market burn if they can win the elections. And then you've got the issue with the media propagating all this stuff on the internet, all this stuff in the in televised broadcasts, creating hysteria. It's really, really ridiculous. I mean, there's a virus that came out in the US, a year or so ago. It's a fairly new virus and it's killed tenfold just in the US alone, what the coronavirus has killed worldwide. I mean, it's ridiculous. 1.3 billion people in China. Look at the death toll of flu on an annual basis, and you'll get an idea of what you're actually dealing with here. It's a low-level virus. There are some conspiracy theories going around, and I don't like using that because, I mean, a lot of these guys are fairly credible. I've got a friend who's in the military who's told me that there may be spliced DNA. So you've got your gene markers in the coronavirus. There are identified gene markers, and it looks like there may be spliced DNA. That is human intervention 101 in a virus. So if that's the case, that's why I think governments are freaking out. I don't think we're getting the whole story from governments, but the virus itself is fairly mundane. It seems more like a test run to me than an actual pandemic. It looks like a test run. Whether it was released on purpose or not, no one knows, do we? People think that it was created in China and maybe accidentally released, and that's probably, fairly accurate. Whether it was, designed as an actual biological weapon, I don't think so, because it's not hard-hitting enough, is it? It's not hard-hitting enough. I think that maybe it was made in a lab. Maybe they were playing around with something and it's been released somehow. But I have seen videos on the net of people in China literally going from elevator to elevator, spitting on their hands and rubbing it on the buttons, trying to spread it. So we're getting a sort of a distorted view, if you like, of how contagious it is and how fast it's spreading when people are engaging in that sort of activity. I've seen the videos. I've seen videos of people doing that. You can look it up on the net. It's definitely happening. So who are they working for? Why are they doing it? I don't really know. Some people are saying it's got HIV DNA in it, which is maybe freaking people out because that would mean it's sort of been spliced in a way where the immunity, the human immunity to the virus would be diminished, if you know what I mean. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it's a very, very low-level, mundane sort of flu. It really isn't that bad. You're looking at people with pre-existing health conditions who will die from it, not people who are healthy. People who are already on death row, basically, with their health conditions, are the people at risk. And if you look at the death rates, and with the worst case projections of 28,000 people dying in Australia, You know, 28,000 people dying. Of course they're going to die. There's 28,000 people plus in Australia who have pre-existing health conditions, which are basically terminal. People in aged care who will die will probably fill a large majority of that number. So we're freaking out over nothing. I mean, influenza kills 5,000 people a year in Australia. It doesn't even get a mention. It kills 45,000 to 50,000 in the US. I don't know how many people it kills in China. I was looking at a statistic the other day, but I can't remember it. But that's what's going on. Look, guys, thanks for watching. This is just a bit of an update from my part of the world. We can keep reaching out and sharing information, which is credible, because the media are just distorting this. They're using it for ratings. They're using it as a big beat up. We've got government groups who are, you know, distorting the facts to use it for their own agendas. We all know this is happening, and it happens often. Why people are putting so much credence in the media right now and getting all hysterical, it just shows how freaking stupid they are. They're dumb people, but I guess we're the smart people. So this is Amiga. It's just a quick update from my part of the world, and I hope you guys are all staying safe. Until I see you again, God bless you. Bye.